division, and all the other quarterbacks in that division were rookies or backups, and they all did better against those same divisional opponents that Carson Wentz was barely beating by the skin of his teeth and kind of lucky turning the ball over on third down in the fourth quarter, and then the team would happen to recover it. He did worse than all those first-year quarterbacks and all those backup quarterbacks did against those same teams. No, he wasn't good in 2019. Stop it. And this is the truth. So because he was great that 1 year, you say, well, how could he be a bust? Well, the fact is he did get hurt toward the end of the season, and Nick Foles did take over, and I thought they were dead in the water. I like Nick Foles, but he's no Carson Wentz. But they caught fire and won the Super Bowl, and Foles won Super Bowl MVP against Tom Brady, who threw over 500 yards. He won Super Bowl MVP. And then the next year, whatever you want to say, well, the team was this and that. They were 5-6. They were under 500 and dead in the water when, once again, Wentz got hurt. Foles took over. They caught fire, made the playoffs, won a playoff game on the road against the Bears, who everyone thought, a lot of people thought might get to the NFC Championship game, and then almost beat the Saints. Wasn't Foles' fault, put the ball in the receiver's hands. So that's the truth of what happened with Wentz. He shockingly regressed from 2017, MVP caliber player, who nevertheless got hurt, never got there, into a player who lost his job this year. It was steadily downhill. And Stephen A., they gave him a huge contract. An elite quarterback contract, the kind of contract you give a player to make up for other deficiencies. And you know why there were other deficiencies, Stephen A.? What'd they trade him for? A third and a conditional second. Do you remember what they gave up to get him? I had to refresh my memory. I knew it was a lot, but oh my God. Guys, they gave up the 8th pick in that draft to move up to the 2nd pick, along with a 3rd rounder and 4th rounder, and a 1st rounder the next year, and a 2nd rounder the year after that. They put all that together to move up to draft Carson Wentz. The 8th, another 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th to get that guy, and then you paid him over $100 million? And he was so bad he lost his job, and even the 1 year he was great, another guy took over the team and won the Super Bowl, and the following year the team wasn't underperforming until the other guy took over. How could you not call that a bust?
Easily, because I know sports and I watch them. And I know a bust when I see one. And a bust is somebody that gets drafted and never shows you a damn thing. Let me give you an example, Max Kellerman, of a bust. Jamarcus Russell, that's a bust. Kwame Brown, that's a bust. Michael Olowokandi, that's a bust. Those are busts, Max. People who get drafted number 1 overall and never show up. That's a bust, Max Kellerman. Carson Wentz, after his first season going 7-9, they go 13-3. He guides them to an 11-2 record before tearing 2 ligaments in his knee at the Coliseum here in Los Angeles, and Nick Foles took them the rest of the way and guided them to a Super Bowl. He was a leading candidate for league MVP honors. He comes back the next year. Yes, he wasn't fully healthy. Yes, the record was 5-6, but you still saw a bunch of cast-offs and cats that, you know what, you questioned whether or not what they could bring to the table. Actually, that was the year after. But I'm saying he wasn't fully 100% healthy, not even close to it. Not to mention the fact that the year that they went to the Super Bowl, we have to take into account what he was working with. Frank Reich was his offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach, essentially. All right? And then he departed. Now, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you got a guy that you moved up in the draft twice to draft number 2 overall. You draft him number 2 overall. You give him the keys to the city, the keys to the franchise. He's got the head coach in Doug Peterson. He's got the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator rather, in Frank Reich. What happens? He's considered the golden child. You pacify him. You do all of these things, just like when he was at North Dakota State and everybody was talking about he's the man and all of this other stuff. You even had elected officials speaking glowingly about him. It was crazy. Okay? This is the guy that he was. And then Frank Reich all of a sudden disappears once he departs, or when he goes to Indy, and Carson Wentz doesn't have that security blanket. He doesn't receive the same level of coaching. This is the indictment that I completely support you about, Max Kellerman. When Carson Wentz, even though Frank Reich was gone, Carson Wentz was led to believe he was the man, like most franchise quarterbacks are led to believe. He was pacified to such a degree. The faith that he had clearly was in Frank Reich. It was never in Doug Peterson. So him and Doug Peterson didn't see eye to eye. They didn't seem to be on the same page. What happens? He's audibling. He's not listening to the coaches. He doesn't believe in what they're trying to get him to do. He ends up holding on to the ball too much. He ends up getting sacked too much. You got individuals that he's playing with. You know, one was a damn third stringer. One was a practice player. Deshaun Jackson goes down. Nelson Aguilar at the time goes down. Alshon Jeffrey goes down. The list went on and on and on. So there was a lot of things working against him. And in the end, he ended up having a god-awful season this past year. But that's not a bust. A bust is somebody that reveals to you they never, ever, ever deserved to be picked where they were picked. Look, they shouldn't have been valued. They were straight garbage, and they don't deserve any kind of love. That's not Carson Wentz. He fell apart, but earlier on in his career, damn it, he had validated that high pick that he was.
He's not Jamarcus Russell. He's not Anthony Bennett. That's right. He's not Darko Milicic. That's right. He's not a bust along those lines.
Forgot about Darko Milicic. Yeah, right.
That's right. But
yeah, forgot about that one.
But if you're talking boom or bust, I'm taking everything into account. It's stretching the definition a little bit. It is. But if you're asking me straight up, which is why I like the question, could you say that? I really can't say anything else, because you have to take into consideration the amount of resources invested in Carson Wentz. You're pointing out the reasons it went bad. And I thought it went bad earlier. You know, everyone else is pointing to 2019. He didn't have anything. I saw regression then. And even in 2018, he wasn't what he was in 2017. But Stephen A., if you spend, a guy's still 27 years old, right? If you spend, well, now he's 28. If you spend the 8th pick, another number 1, a number 2, a number 3, and a number 4, and then you spend $120 million, and what you get back is a guy that's so toxic that you have to, and so bad on the field and toxic otherwise to your culture, that you have to get rid of him for a 2nd and a 3rd? To me, that's a bust. Now, he did contribute in 2017. He did. But he was not on the field for any of those playoff games. In fact, he didn't have any playoff wins. That's the truth of the matter. So you put all that into a guy, both in draft capital and then in cash, and what you get are those returns that are so abysmal after one great year that wasn't even completed, that are so abysmal that you get rid of him for a tiny fraction and have to take a $30 million cap hit on top of it. To me, that's a bust.
I don't think it's a bust. And the reason why I don't think it's the bust is because I don't view it that way. I think about the basically insurmountable odds he had to overcome when he took them to a division title last year, despite what he was working with. I think I give him a lot of credit for that. You talk about you saw regression. That's not to me. I saw a guy bereft of talent. He didn't have much to work with, and he carried the Eagles to the division crown, and then got hurt in the damn first quarter of the playoff game against Seattle, for crying out loud, which was predictable because he could be injury prone. Last year was obviously god awful. There is no excuse for that. But those first couple of years in the league, there's no question he was not a bust. He was not a bust at all. And when you talk about, investing in him, you got to invest in the talent around him, too, because no quarterback can be successful throwing to himself.
How can you? You gave up all the draft picks to get him.
They gave other people
weapons. That was for a hot minute. He took a total of 8 snaps, fellas. A total of 8 snaps in the playoffs in his 5-year career. I will leave you with that. When we come back here on First Take, we got to talk about Deion Sanders, the Hall of Fame.